suppose the MOOCs debate goes to the heart of an argument that we've looked at in its different forms this morning. It's the promise of low overheads, democratized education, a return perhaps to that ideal of meritocracy which many people have expressed some concern about. Are these alternative degrees, alternative qualifications worth the paper they may or may not be written on? Where do they stand in the race for credentialism? Or are we kind of kidding ourselves, and will high-skilled jobs and high-status occupations always require that all-important traditional credential? Let me start with you on that, Anant. Do MOOCs really threaten the existence of the long-established traditional educational institution? One view is we're inevitably going to be learning more from computer screens because they are in our lives every which way. Another view is, Professor Friend said to me, are you kidding me? So you're going to take me and replace me with that thing? So where are we then in this sort of curve of perception of blended learning in the MOOC?
I think it's how the question is asked. If the question is, will MOOCs replace the university institution? The answer is absolutely not. If the question is, will MOOCs and online learning completely disrupt the way we do business, the way we educate people? The answer is absolutely yes, and we are already doing that. Our education system really hasn't changed in hundreds of years, although education researchers have invented and discovered all kinds of new ways of doing things. So what we are doing, very simply put, is applying technology and finding a way to adopt some of the ideas that have been known for a long time. So just as one example, the 1972 paper that talked about how if you interleave instruction with activity, it's called active learning, then that's known to be a good idea. And our edX pedagogy learning model is based on that principle, and we're using technology to apply that. It's not something new. It's been known in the education community for a long time. So I think this will change the way we do business. Already in our university partners, the online content is being used on the campus to change the way education is done on campuses. At MIT, just as one example, 2 out of 3 undergraduates today, 2,800 out of 4,500, are using edX on campus in their online classes. Within the space of 2.5 years, it has already changed the way the education business is being conducted in our campuses.
You used MIT as your example there, and if I wanted to be difficult, and heaven knows, that's not my character at all, but you look around and you think, well, yeah, of course MIT. If you could find one group of people who are likely to want to spend even more time sitting in front of a computer screen, that's probably where I'm going to find them. What about the wider model of the university? What about the liberal arts education? What about the people who are not going to be, if you like, sort of pre-inclined towards this way of learning? Does it disrupt in a positive way their education, or is it simply a kind of way of threat to them because it can be seen as a sort of driving down cost and making their quality argument a harder one to make?
I think this transcends the field. We have about 300 courses on edX today and 3 million learners from every country in the world today. These courses range in topics from technology to liberal arts, to music. And just as one example, I was speaking to one of you in the audience just 20 minutes ago, and she was telling me that she was taking a course on China from Harvard. Mm. And she was describing how they were talking about Chinese historical artifacts and how being able to take an artifact, which you can see in a museum from far away, but here in a MOOC, in an online format, you can look at the artifact, you can rotate it, look behind it, and overturn it, and really examine it in a way that you never could in a 200-person classroom or in a museum for that matter. But this format enables that. Particularly as on edX, we have online gamification, online lab technology that lets you interact with the content.
But hang on a minute, I'm just going to sort of be, I'm going to be difficult actually, why not? you talked about basically interfacing with an object, which is a really nice idea and something that any 3D interactive experience can offer. Now, what about interfacing with a human being? Because that does seem to still be more of the sticking point, I would say, out of my 40% roughly of negative feedback on the coverage we did of the MOOCs was, are you kidding? You cannot replace the human being. Now, you might say, well, we don't entirely want to. We want a blended learning model, but that then pushes up the cost. If this interactivity with the real human being has to then be sort of costed in, how can the MOOC then be big, massive, and free?
I think the key here is that I would look at it in two ways. One is that for those who don't have access to a great campus, great teachers, great students to work with. I was in India 20 hours ago. And there, unless, I just think back to I met my younger brother, and he represents many of the students in the country. He was not among the top 1%. He could not get into the free universities. He was not one of the bottom 1%, I shouldn't say bottom one, the 1% of the richest people who could afford to pay private college tuitions. He was in the big middle ground. Yeah. And so he could not get into a university, and so he didn't go to university. And so I think there are a large number of people that don't have access for a variety of reasons. And so because of that, I think the online format can give them access. On the other hand, for those who can go to universities, I think the blended model can be very compelling, where you combine the in-person interaction with the online to get the best of both worlds. And finally, just as you talked about giving me a hard time, I'll give all of us a hard time. I'll give all of us a hard time, which is, frankly, I think we've lost the battle. My daughter, I can communicate with her by texting and tweeting, but heavens forbid if I try to talk to her. But the only response I get is,
the secret to bringing up happy children, really, is
silences. She's 15, it's silences and grunts. But I text her or tweet her, boom, I get an instant response. Friends, we've lost the battle.
Yes. The operating model of the teenager has probably changed irrevocably. Hannes, you're operating in a different context from a lot of what we've heard this morning, but a lot of the same challenges. You're in Europe. We have a lot of big problem with youth unemployment. We have a skills mismatch. We have a different university system, more public money on the whole in the system, as some of the speakers earlier said that they rather wish that they had here. So tell me, how does iversity fit into that rather different environment?
Thank you very much for having me, first of all. I think the challenges are similar and dissimilar in many ways. So obviously, we do, in the US, there's very much a conversation about the cost crisis in higher education. And obviously, with the public debt crisis that we see in Europe, there is an issue there as well, with cuts, particularly in Southern Europe, to the university infrastructure or the funding of the universities. On the other hand, I think we also talked about, education is never for free, but it's a question of who pays for it, and it could either be the state or the individual. And there, the major difference lies where in Europe, obviously, it's usually not the individual, but the state. And the fact that the Baumol effect is probably well known, the fact that relative to other industries, education is becoming increasingly more expensive because we don't have any efficiency gains for, maybe the introduction of the microphone so you can talk at a larger group of people in a room, but that's about it. That leads to increasingly higher costs, and the effects of that in the US have been that tuition has been going up and up and up. And in Europe, I think what we don't have a cost crisis, we have a quality crisis. Because faculty-student ratios have deteriorated significantly in recent decades. And so that's one major difference. And then the other difference dissimilarity that you could point to is because you said, the American system of higher education now, there's an interesting observation from a professor from Stanford who gave a lecture in Berlin that I attended as a student, and he said, well, the one thing that you have to know about the American system of higher education is it's not a system. Whereas in Europe, we do have a system. I mean, here, you have regional accreditation and a bunch of different institutions that have very different outlooks on higher education, whereas in Europe, we have a fairly homogeneous and harmonized system, particularly now in the context of the Bologna process, and the European credit transfer system was instituted. And I think this provides us with a great opportunity because the last 15 years, this harmonization of the definition of university-level credit kind of laid the groundwork, the administrative legal groundwork on top of which technology now can, really I think technology can really take advantage of this.
Every time we speak, I push you a bit on this because this is this potential, just in a nutshell, really. You could actually theoretically get accreditation much quicker in Europe, as you suggest, because you have this process by which you can compare degrees, and you already have an ability to sort of move around between European countries. So you could put the question the other way around, and why not accredit the MOOC? But my impression is that that's not the battle that you're fighting at the moment. So how do you want to make your product, do you want to go that route? Do you want to argue about credentialism? Or do you see another way that the MOOC is going to become more center stage in the European system?
I think both options are valid to either create new kinds of credentials like what we're seeing with the Udacity example has been mentioned, and call it X series, or call it I don't know what Coursera is calling it. Udacity is calling it micro degrees. Now in our case we call it bundles. It doesn't really matter. I mean, there are these new kind of certificates that are emerging. Where you put together some of these courses, then maybe you throw in, like we do, a on-site seminar that concludes, sort of as a capstone, concludes the 2 courses, and then, as I said, we call that a bundle, and that's a certificate in its own right. That's one way to go, and the other is, and that's what we seek to do, is to really integrate with the existing institutions of higher education and the existing system. I mean, as Anant rightly said, this is not we're not taking on the university system, but we try to work with universities to help them market the content that they produce at very high fixed and variable costs locally, globally.
Right. And I suppose we both have been interested in this for, well, whenever we think the MOOC begins. There are those who could go back to the University of Manitoba in 2008, and some who even would cite micro examples from before that. But I think we could say, roughly speaking, sort of 2 years, 2 to 3 years, as being a sort of scale model that we could discuss. What have you learned in those 2 years? What do you do differently now as a major provider that you didn't do at the start? Anna?
Sure. It's a long list of things.
Give us a short version.
I'll give you a couple of quick ones. One example is that it became very clear that people wanted to be part of small groups. And even though you have a big, gaggle of 150,000 people, or 300,000 people as in CS50, which is the Intro to Computer Science MOOC on edX, people still want to be part of smaller groups that stay together as cohorts. That's a keyword, cohort. So we heard a lot about that, and so we're introducing cohorts into our platform. We've been piloting it for about 1.5 years, been quite successful, and we're formally introducing it in a week or 2, where there'll be the ability for a professor or university to create lots of little cohorts in the context of a bigger course, where they can have smaller group discussions, where small cohorts can have special features given to them and so on. So that's one idea. A second idea was that having the students left alone wasn't such a good idea. So we learned that if you reminded the students about deadlines and held their hand a little bit, sort of serve a little bit like their parent, that improved the connection rates and completion rates. And so we've done that as well. And finally, the most important thing is what professors are learning is that they want to learn as they go along. And so we introduced about a month ago A/B testing on our platform, which means that within a course, a professor can now give students A version and a B version. And for that matter, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, as many versions as I want. And edX can randomize the students into each of these so that professors can see which of these is working, which is not working, and thereby continually improve their courses. So just imagine now educators can become engineers. And just as Google continues to improve its website through A/B testing, they're now using the web technology within the classroom, within the MOOCs, so that individuals can begin continually improving the way we educate.
Hans, is there anything that you've done differently at iversity to the edX or Coursera models, which might be more familiar to people here?
Yes, I mean, obviously we do look to edX and Coursera for inspiration. I think we're all learning from each other, and there are a lot. If you look at the websites and sort of how they explain what they do to each other, I mean, I think Coursera and edX, it's really just the same words. Take great courses from universities around the world. So I think there is a lot of similarity, but then obviously each course is different, and the didactic approach every professor takes is different.
Why have national platforms? This is a question that comes up as I go around Europe. I find FutureLearn in the UK. There is a French variety, there is iversity. I mean, I'm sure you're all kind of marvelous at what you do, but in a way, aren't you all in a race? And at some point, it will become clearer whether a certain number of providers, regardless of whether they are based in the States or elsewhere, are going to dominate the market, or whether people like national platforms.
I mean, we don't see ourselves as a national platform in any way. I mean, we work with instructors from all over Europe, and we have a couple of partnerships in Italy, for example. We have, a professor from Madrid. So we've taken a European approach from the outset, and our student base is also completely international. I think that's somewhat different in the case of FUN, for example, the French platform that is very much targeted towards the local market, also language-wise, which isn't the case for us. We have courses mostly in English and then some local languages. So that being said, I don't think this is winner-takes-all market. I don't think this is like Facebook because there are a lot of regional or national peculiarities, and that's I mean the ECTS, the European Credit Transfer System that I mentioned earlier, is one of those that we seek to leverage because, as I said, we want to enable students to take free online courses and make it count. These are two very important components of this because you can learn all sorts of stuff online. You can go to YouTube and Wikipedia and whatnot, but being able to take an exam and earn a credential and prove your learning is, I think, what makes the crucial difference. What differentiates us from learning flea markets like Udemy, for example.
A learning flea market. What a marvelous image!
If I could add a little apostrophe to that, one of the things we've heard with national platforms is that they want two things. One is, if you look at edX or iversity and Coursera and others, we decide who partners with us. By we, it is with edX, it's a consortium, we're a nonprofit. Who we partner with, what kind of courses are on the platform, what's education model. We have all the student data. It's hosted on Amazon on US soil. So what France told us, and China, and India, and Saudi Arabia, and Taiwan, and others, that look, they want to own the student data. Second, they want to control and own what universities put up courses on the platform. Third, they want to decide what courses they want to offer. It's very nationalistic, and they all believe that education is a fundamental human right. And so why the surprise is that they want to have a way in which they can do it. So what edX did was, as a nonprofit,
I'm just going to ask you to be quite brief because I think it would be nice to get some questions in if you could, Anna.
So what we did was we made our platform open source. And so a number of countries have adopted open edX as the national infrastructure. So France, with France Université Numérique, China, Saudi Arabia, have all launched national platforms using edX, or using open edX, which is our freely available platform.
Open platform, open mic session. Off you go. First hands win. Yes, let's take a gentleman here at the front. In fact, there's a gentleman here and then one on this side. If we could nip the mic to the land speed record, that'd be great.
Michael Waxman, I'm with Intet. Anant, one question in her. Where do you see the impact of your content of actually, let's take the 4,000 universities in the United States. President of CSU, Cleveland State University, is here. Will they teach the MIT engineering program in the future? Because that's what students will look for, to have a branded content library that is fully developed with A/B testing and others that most of the 2,500 four-year colleges can never afford.
Very interesting. Thank you. Gentleman over this side, I think, had a hand up. Yeah.
Hi, Paul Beresford-Hill from the Mountbatten Institute. How can MOOCs help to facilitate the rather wistful title of this forum and reconnect education and the workforce?
Great. Right. Hannes, why don't you lead off on both of those?
Well, I'll respond to the second. I think the first was probably targeted at Anand mostly. I think there are some interesting things we can do when you look at the fact that the credit system is now competency based, and you're supposed to be able to tell, okay, this is the learning outcome, these are the skills and competencies you acquire from this course. And if you connect these, in the European Union, we have a process that also started where all the potential skills and competencies that someone may have been laid out. And if you could say, okay, this course gets you to level 4 in this competency and level 7 in that, and you could, I mean, just like the credit system works within the university context, you have the same in the work space and professional development space. That could be very interesting, where you build your own online profile like you would in a computer game, in a sense, where you say, okay, by picking these couple of courses, I'll get to these kind of levels of competencies that are relevant to employers. And then obviously employers would have to say, okay, these are the competencies that we value, and that's how the two would then connect.
Anant, a word on that, but perhaps also to the first point, or would
Sure.
these be sort of retrofitted, if you like, to other universities at scale?
For the corporate market, edX will be, just watch the news, will be imminently launching a professional ed, where specialized courses for the corporate world will be launched on edX. We did a pilot on big data about a year ago. Very, very successful. About 3,500 people took the course for a $500 fee. And so targeted to executives. So we will be doing that. The second question is, will University X adopt a course from University Y and teach it? Absolutely, it's going to be all mixed up, and it's going to happen. I teach at MIT. I've been teaching for 26 years. One of the courses I teach, I adopted a course lock, stock, and barrel from my colleague, and I teach the course. We're already used to taking a textbook or taking a course from a colleague and teaching it. Why should I develop something completely new? I do it. I've done it myself, and I'm proud of it. I add things to that course. And similarly, I see that happening in universities. You create your own courses. You borrow courses like a textbook and use them.
Right, let's get a couple more questions. A hand here. Thank you.
Hi, Bob Colvin from Christopher Newport University in coastal Virginia. I taught online 15, 20 years ago, and I had a male student who was doing really well. His girlfriend broke up with him for 3 weeks. His writing went terrible. And then when she got back together with him, his performance increased dramatically. I'm convinced we graduated someone who was illiterate because it was totally online, and I had no idea who was actually taking that. So we ended up killing online. I said we were going to eventually graduate the family dog if we weren't careful. How do you know who's getting credit? Now, certainly you can learn online, but how do you know who's getting the credential and who's getting credit?
I think there are a couple of interesting sort of answers to that, various technologies, but perhaps we'll hear from the back of the room first. Yeah, let's get somebody from the back, because I know what it's like when you're sitting there and no one gets to you. It does mean a quick sprint there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Dana Durazi. I'm with the Graduate Network, and we deal with the adult population. We actually are piloting a course ourselves, and so I was curious to hear a bit about, I think technology is going to end up being the gatekeeper to who's going to access this great innovative education space. So could you talk a little bit about on-ramps for different populations, or if you have your own breakdown for who's using your products, who's being successful in the courses?
We're definitely going to do that, and one more, because I think we'll run out of time for lunch. Let's take the lady with a hand up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Maria Drago. I work at the Learning Branch of United Nations Development Program's Talent Management Team. As it is, we get plenty of questions from people asking us, and this is globally in developing countries, our staff asking us, is this university versus that university good? Are we approved to study there? And we always tell them, this is not part of our job. It's like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon, basically. My question, maybe particularly for Mr. Agarwal, is down the line, do you have a strategy for some type of accreditation? Because my fear or my nightmare, which hasn't come yet but will, is one day one of our staff is going to come to us and say, well, I've done all these courses, so now what? Do I get credit for this as a degree program or something? Thank you.
A great range of questions there. Why don't we start with you, Anna? Bob wondering, how did we know that the family dog hadn't actually brought in the credit, hard, poor work at the screen, and on-ramping for different groups. And then Maria's last question there on when we reach the tipping point where you kind of have a bundle of things and you just accredit them like a degree, and how would we possibly control that? Yes,
I'll try to give one-sentence responses to each very quickly.
Yeah.
With MOOCs, there's education and there's assessment. And with the assessment and credentialing, there are technologies to verify that the student is who they say they are. We use a company called Software Secure that takes a picture of the person, and we give verified certificates. There are other ways of virtual monitoring. To the question of credentialing, look, online programs have been around. Southern New Hampshire University has online degrees, gives online degrees. ASU, number of companies are giving, universities are giving online degrees already. So there's nothing new here. And so I just give it, a few months, maybe a year or two before credit begins routinely being given to MOOC courses. Already, John F. Kennedy University is giving its students credit for edX courses. There are many others.
Do you mean universities will give it, or it will be irresistible that employers will simply recognize
Universities
it?
are already giving credit for edX courses. John F. Kennedy University is giving university credit for edX courses.
As one?
And again,
As one university?
We'll see more and more.
We have three that are giving credits. I mean, we have much fewer courses, or many fewer courses than you guys do, but out of those we have, the 50 or so, 3 are giving credit. And I'm working on that as well, where we generally see that, as Anant said, it's a general tendency that this is the way to go. Also, on that point with the credential, the identification of students, we work with the same company, so I think that's not the big point here. I think the interesting difference, and as you say, online education has been around. This is not like we are proposing something entirely new that is completely untested. And distance education has been around for much longer. The difference here lies in the fact that now it becomes available at the course level. Clay Shirky said this is higher education's iTunes moment. And that's where I think the major difference lies, that now it's about personalized education. You can pick and choose a la carte what works for you, which courses you're interested in. You don't have to sign up, because I think this is very much a niche product. The online degree that takes a year or two, there are very few people who have the stamina to sit through this for an entire year or two. I think the big change is in this complementary model, where alongside your bachelor's degree or alongside your professional life, you take individual courses that complement what you're doing.
Just very quickly, perhaps back to you, Anant, on this closing point, where we did have a question about the on-ramping, which I thought was, particularly in the context of the big skills subject that we have before us today. You think there's more work to be done on that?
I think with the on-ramping, there's right now what is amazing is that we have people going to college, and before they get a job, I hear of the skills gap. People go to high schools, and before they go to college, I hear of the college readiness gaps. What the heck are schools are they doing? When we hear of all these gaps, there's gaps and gaps. Yeah. There's gaps everywhere. And so I think we all have to do better. And just for the college readiness gap, last week edX launched high school courses, a high school initiative with starting with 26 high school courses that will enable advanced placement level courses to provide on-ramps into college. We also launched on-ramps into AP courses, so that students in high school can take those on-ramps courses during summer that will serve as an on-ramp into AP courses in their high schools. So I think we will bridge these gaps over time.
I must off-ramp you now, because we're heading towards our lunch ramp. Just a quick point on Bob's question about how do you know who's actually doing the course. One answer is, of course, technology, but the story that I loved and researched was about the Japanese university, which tried to design a technology which would recognize the imprint of your posterior on your office chair, on your chair at your desk, and apparently no two bottoms are the same.